In 1920s Europe, industrialization was advancing at a rapid pace. The Great War was over, and it took the power of the machine to rebuild the continent.
Mi dispiace, padre, che andiamo così piano. Questa strada è breve ma piena di buche. Padre Guardini?
C'è un problema con la macchina?
Queste automobili nuove non le fanno più come prima. Ci dobbiamo fermare, purtroppo. Mi dispiace, padre, per questo inconveniente. Qualche minuto e possiamo ripartire.
I had hardly reached Italy before I felt I was being addressed by something very significant, including an element that made me very sad. What has already taken place up in the north, I saw beginning here.
Guardi, mi dia 2 minuti e vedrà che ripartiamo.
I saw machines invading the land that had previously been the home of culture. On the singing lines of a small town, I saw the great box of a factory. Look how in a landscape in which all the risings and fallings and measures and proportions came together in one clear melody, alone with the lofty bell tower, there was suddenly a smokestack, and everything fell apart. I have a plain sense that a world is developing in which human beings can no longer live. A world that is in some way non-human.
Tutto a posto, padre. Abbiamo risolto. Saremo sul lago tra circa mezz'ora.
What is coming is not just greater and stronger extension, but something different in its whole order and basic attitude. What will become of life if it is delivered up to the power of this dominion?
Guardini was one of the most significant Catholic thinkers of the first half of the 20th century, and really, in many ways, an inspiration for the Second Vatican Council.
Those who've studied Guardini include John Paul II, Benedict XVI, it includes Pope Francis. Not only that, but he's had influence throughout the Academy.
Lui è nato a Verona. Quando aveva circa 1 anno, la famiglia è emigrata in Germania per motivi di lavoro del padre, che era commerciante. Ha iniziato gli studi e si è connaturato tedesco apparentemente per poter lavorare, per poter insegnare.
Guardini, in 1923, takes a teaching position at the University of Berlin. He's hired to be a Catholic professor in a school which has a Protestant theology faculty, and he's there because increasingly, after World War I, Catholics in Germany are recognized for their political influence and their contributions to a united society.
La famiglia era tornata dalla Germania nei primi anni '20 e lui è venuto in Italia dopo la partenza da bambino per trovare la mamma che era a Varenna e quindi gli ha fatto conoscenza di questo lago.
So as Guardini arrives home, as it were, in the north of Italy, he sees this great box of a factory and smokestack that disrupts this romantic landscape that was, for him, an integrated place, a place of human culture. This becomes an occasion for him to reflect on these great changes.
Guardini is one of the handful of people who took the modern world seriously enough and its technological origins seriously enough that it had to be incorporated in Catholic theology.
Guardini was right that there was a new culture being formed by this massive industrial technology. But I think in 2020, we're facing the dawn of a different sort of culture being driven by a different technology, not mass industrial technology, but technology you can hold in your hand.
As Catholics, we have to be concerned about the effects that this may have on our spiritual life. Letters from Lake Como is an early work of Guardini's, and he raises a lot of issues that Catholics would do well to ponder.
I think Romano Guardini understood himself to be wrestling between those two worlds, the one that had been and the one that was coming to be. And as a person who stands in between, in some ways takes the position of the spokesman of the past to remember and to project forth. And also, maybe it's not unfair to say something of the prophet of the future.
Spero facciate buone vacanze, padre. Vostro fratello arriva al 12?
Esatto, grazie.
Riposatevi bene.
Reading Guardini's letters from Lake Como, I was struck by how contemporary it seemed. It didn't seem like a voice from the past commenting on a world of the past, but a voice speaking in the present to the present moment. They speak in the voice of a friend. In fact, they start, "Dear friend."
Dear friend, the first impression remains. It becomes deeper. People rejoice at progress. Of course, it brings them work and food. Many who would otherwise have to emigrate can stay at home. Automobiles cross the seas, factories grow in numbers, electrification goes forward, all things are fabricated.
As he's reflecting on his experience, he writes to his friend, a pastor, Joseph Weigert, whom he's known from his seminary years. And it's out of that he writes and publishes his letters to Lake Como.
Guardini has a very haunting image, actually, between an appropriate use of technology, like a sailboat, and one that tends to get out of our control, even as it enhances our control, which is like a steamliner.
Take a vessel sailing on Lake Como. Though it is of considerable weight, the masses of wood and linen, along with the force of the wind, combine so perfectly that it has become light. When it sails before the wind, my heart laughs to see how something of this sort has become so light and bright of itself by reason of its perfect form. In my very blood, I have a sense of creation here. A primal work of human creativity. Yet, do you not see how natural the work remains? Those who control the ship are still very closely related to the wind and waves. We have here real culture, elevation above nature, yet decisive nearness to it. It grieves me when I see built into one of these vessels, these noble creations, a gasoline engine, so that with upright mast but no sails, the vessel clatters through the waves like a ghost of itself. Go even further and the sailing vessel becomes a steamer, a great ocean liner. Culture indeed, a brilliant technological achievement. And yet, a colossus of this type presses on through the sea regardless of the wind and waves. It is so large that nature no longer has power over it. We can no longer see nature on it. People on board eat and drink and sleep and dance. They live as if in houses and on city streets. Mark you, something decisive has been lost here. Not only has there been a step-by-step development, improvement, and increase in size, a fluid line has been crossed that we cannot fix precisely, but can only detect when we have long since passed over it. A line on the far side of which living closeness to nature has been lost.
Thinking about where that line is, certainly a sailboat keeps you humble, right? You have to be in constant interaction with nature, with the wind and with the waves. And so you're in a relationship with nature in a sense, and there's a humility there. Whereas with the steamliner, it's really a kind of mastery of the waves and the wind, though in extreme situations, like a huge storm at sea, or like the Titanic with the icebergs, it comes back to haunt you that you actually aren't master of the situation. And the humility returns, you might even say, in a tragic mode.
I think all of Guardini's thought arises from his fundamental commitment to the truth of the human person. And at the basis of that is, I think, a profound biblical anthropology. We are told that the human creature, the being that comes from the earth, the Adam from the Adamah, is intentionally formed by the hands of the Creator, is given breath from the Creator's own breath. And the human being only comes to be through the union of those two things. That basic principle of union is what he's holding to in the reflections about technology.
Guardini was a walker, and there are paths around Lake Como on the lake itself, but also up into the mountains which rise sharply from Lake Como. And it seems like every day he's off taking long walks in the woods.
I have gone across to the other side of the lake, where there are no villas, but real farming. Think of the plow. It too is a primitive cultural artifact. I, as a city dweller, have seen the mystery of humanity as plowmen worked across the field and tore up the earth to make it receptive to the seed. Profound culture, yet very close to nature. But what happens when the hand plow is mechanized? Certainly, this is a wonderful work of technology, and it gives us more bread and raises the standard of living. But riding on the tractor is different from following the plow.
When I picture Guardini walking through those little villages and seeing the farmers, I think there's something elegant and aesthetic on the surface of what he saw, but that betokens a deeper elegance where form and function have come together in a beautiful way to create a beautiful way of life.
I feel like there's a cultural movement back to that sense of beauty that you find in older things, older buildings, because science, in a way, science is leading us there. We're seeing more and more research about how important it is to let the land lie fallow in farming and how toxic chemicals are that people put in modern paint. This is all coming out in the research, and I think it's a really positive sign because it means that our instinct, our longing for that beauty is grounded in, not just in a kind of nostalgia, but it's grounded in a moral good.
Guardini is concerned with the line or the break that occurs when we experience a certain distance from nature that becomes less human. We cross the line when we accelerate, whether it's physical speed, like in a motorboat or an automobile, whether it's the speed of information, which we experience quite frequently on an everyday basis with the amount of information that streams by on screens, the underlying ethic for all of these technological pursuits is one of speed. If you think about many of the modern bioethical debates, the slower that we look at things, whether it's the development of a baby in the womb or a disease process in an elderly person with Alzheimer's, when you slow it down, you see the person. When you speed it up, you see an abstraction. And it's that abstraction and artificiality that Guardini is so concerned about, because that is the dehumanizing force.
Another way of saying this is to quote someone else who was of influence to Guardini himself, Augustine: we become what we receive. And so if we are to receive and to make tools and instruments that are not human, then we will become not human. And yet if we make material, a culture, literature, art, architecture, a world oriented towards the adoration of God, then we will become the kind of creature that adores God.
Un giorno Romano Guardini fa una gita in barca col fratello Gino, che era il fratello dichiaratamente artista della famiglia, e parlano di arte, come l'arte abbia bisogno di figure singole, diversamente dall'attualità in cui si tende a fare una produzione di massa. Ecco, e lì c'è la grande riflessione sull'epoca della massa, che è un po' l'epoca nostra, insomma.
We were on the lake for over 8 hours, following the shore with its localities and gardens and villas. What riches! My brother said to me, "All that is now gone. It can be there only so long as there are a few to enjoy it. Art is only for the few. Once the masses come, it perishes." I tried to refute this. But is there not oppressively much that is right in it? What speaks to us so strongly from the past was the work of a small aristocracy. Creation also proceeded more slowly. How long a cathedral took to build, how slowly a city came into being, and looking at the larger picture, how slowly history takes its course. But the masses have changed all this. Many things result, and very quickly. Quickly come, quickly go. Unlimited production means that every art of force and cunning must be used to produce unlimited consumption. Nothing has time to ripen. Standardization is the way to go. We build theaters in the form of temples, banks in the form of cathedrals. Working days and Sundays merge into one another. To me, it is as if a terrible machine were crushing our inheritance between the stones. How vulgar life has become in every sphere, even in religion. How we long for an arcane discipline that will protect what is sacred from the marketplace, including the marketplace within.
Massa è quando un individuo non esiste più come individuo, ma diventa un qualcosa di informe. E il dramma dell'oggi è proprio che siamo in un tipo di comunicazione appiattita.
Modern technology invites our voices even to just blend in with noise, to become part of an endless stream of changing gambits for attention.
The smartphone suggests infinity. It suggests infinite possibility and infinite connectedness. You know, there's always something new and exciting in the virtual space. But from a Christian perspective, that infinity, that sense of the eternal that the smartphone offers us, is a phony infinity. It's not infinity. For the Christian, infinity comes into the world through Jesus Christ, not through the smartphone.
I was at church one time and saw a man in the communion line, and his smartphone rang, and he stepped out of line, stepped to the side of the church, and took the call. When we've gotten to this stage, the technology has won a total victory.
Guardini actually gives us an answer to the problem of technology through the liturgy. And he doesn't just mean that the liturgy communicates what the church teaches and believes. They're also formative or remedial moments that teach us what it means to be a human being.
The mystery of the Catholic Church is a mystery of real presence. And it's not only about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, but it's also about the real presence of the Church in the world. The Church has always been present through real people talking to other people, giving sermons, and then administering sacraments that are taken from creation.
Part of being able to understand Christ's real presence in the Eucharist is first being able to understand real presence with each other. And the notion of real presence that is essential to the sacraments is being undermined by false presences, if you will, technologically mediated presences that increasingly appear to be the real thing.
You go to Eucharistic adoration, nothing's given to you immediately. In fact, it seems like nothing is given to you. Just silence and non-spectacle. And if presence is to be known there, if you're to be found by that presence, what's being asked of you is that you wait. The deeper levels of engagement and encounter will never come immediately, but will only come as we wrestle with and struggle through that challenge of waiting. I think that's the case in how we read. I think it's the case in how we see each other, and in the end, see our God.
Our individual salvation is intimately tied to our appreciation, reception, and in turn, employment of sacramental grace. And so therefore, the liturgy is a critical component for the Church moving forward in the digital age.
The most challenging part of his letters, I actually find to be the last letter, because he speaks of the task, and the task begins with this. We have to accept the world in which we find ourselves, which sounds like a very strange thing for him to say after this consistent critique of the world in which we find ourselves. I think especially for a Catholic, you start with what's given. This is the world you have. This is the time you've been given.
Much depends on the present letter. I hope I can succeed in saying what I want to say. We must first say yes to our age. In the inner human world, an analogous deep force has to emerge that will give a new freedom from the world and a very profound way of seeing and relating to it. A yearning is there for the inward, for quiet, for leaving the mad rush and refocusing. I believe that technology, the economy, and politics need such quiet and inner fervor if they are to do their respective jobs. Our age is so uncertain, skeptical, seeking, and homeless that there are not a few today, I believe, who stand directly before God. In this context, the question that faces us will be decided. Will we come to God from the depths of our being, link ourselves to Him, and in His freedom and power master chaos in this coming age? Will there be people who place themselves totally at God's disposal and, alone with and before Him, make the true decisions?
What's the magic kind of balance between faith and technology? That's something that only has to be worked out once you've accepted that there actually is a problem. With Guardini and other great critics of technology, the point is not, is this piece of technology good or bad? The point is that to make that judgment, you have to ask yourself, does this bring us together or does it tear us apart?
We're called to think about the impact that everything will have on our soul and on our relationship with each other and on our relationship with God.
We need pockets of resistance. We need people who are trying to live differently.
Catholics could start out with their own households, and to the extent that you can succeed at that level, then maybe you can start thinking about building alliances with other households.
Where does that will come from to live simply? It comes from the inner life. It comes from a heart and a soul that is in communication and communion with its God. And that sense of relationship with God, with nature, and with human culture provides for us a sense of limits.
The most direct route for the Church to grapple with these issues is to grapple with Guardini. Truly a prophet in his own times and a remarkably important touchstone for the digital world in which we're now living.
Dear friend, at bottom, I do not know what else to say except that from my heart's core, I believe that God is at work. History is going forward in the depths, and we must be ready to play our part, trusting in what God is doing and in the forces He has made to stir within us.